You don't belong here. The words cut through the air like a cold wind, but it wasn't just the sound, it was the sting. The white store manager's hand rose, sharp and deliberate, landing across the black woman's face with a crack that echoed against the glass walls. "This isn't some charity thrift store," she hissed. "Security, escort this woman out. Now." Shoppers froze mid-step. Purses hung forgotten from shoulders, credit cards remained half-slid across counters. Every gaze locked on the confrontation. Disbelief, curiosity, a few cell phones already raised. The woman being humiliated stood utterly still. Diana Williams, 52 years old, regal without trying, did not flinch. She did not shout. She did not beg. Instead, she slowly wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and smiled. Not a smile of submission, but a calm, almost amused expression. The kind of smile that made you wonder if she knew something the rest of the room didn't. And she did. Within minutes, the truth she carried would rip the floor out from under this store and everyone in it. But to understand how the air got so heavy, how a slap became the spark in this powder keg, we have to go back 8 hours earlier. That morning, Diana stepped through the glass doors of Prestige Collection, store number 47 in her retail empire. 847 locations stretched from coast to coast. A fortune worth $2.8 billion, built with her own hands. Yet here she was, worn jeans, a faded sweater, sneakers that had seen better days. She always dressed that way when she visited her stores. Because Diana never wanted to forget the South Carolina street corner where she'd watched her mother be turned away from a shop for looking like she didn't belong. She never wanted to forget the sting in her mother's eyes, the way dignity had to be stitched back together in private. She'd sworn, if she ever had the power, she'd change that story for someone else. Today she had that power. And standing on the sales floor, polishing her image like a trophy, was Brittany Anderson, 42, blonde, perfectly put together, the store manager for the last 12 years. What no one saw under the designer jacket was her gnawing insecurity. Raised in a working-class home, Brittany had clawed her way into this luxury space, and now guarded it like a fortress. She decided who belonged, and who didn't. She wasn't alone. Maria Gonzalez, a single mother clinging to her job. Tyler Brooks, a loyal employee who'd risen under Brittany's wing. Amber Davis, a cashier who hung on Brittany's every word. Helen Carter, an affluent regular who considered herself the gatekeeper of the right clientele. And Carlos Rivera, the security guard who followed Brittany's nods without question. Together they formed a silent wall. When Diana drifted toward the handbag display, just watching, Brittany clocked her from across the room. Worn denim. No designer labels. Sneakers. In Brittany's mind, she didn't need more evidence. "Oh honey, are you lost?" Brittany purred as she approached. The Goodwill's about 15 minutes that way. No hello. No offer of help. Just the syrupy voice of someone convinced she was doing the store a favor by shoving you out. Diana looked up, steady. "No. I'm exactly where I need to be." For a flicker of a moment, their eyes met. The kind of meeting that feels like the start of a storm neither side sees coming. Brittany leaned in, her tone dipping lower, more poisonous. "Sweetie, I don't think you understand the kind of establishment this is. These aren't yard sale prices." What happened next would become the story everyone in that store would tell for the rest of their lives. Exactly who Diana Williams was, no one in that room truly knew. Not yet. But across the boutique, Helen Carter, 67, silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, stood at the silk scarf display, her fingers brushing fabric as light as breath. Helen had been shopping here for years, leaving behind four-figure receipts without a second thought. And Brittany Anderson had courted her loyalty like a prize. When Helen overheard the exchange at the handbag counter, she chuckled. Not a friendly chuckle, but the dry, clipped sound of someone who saw herself as gatekeeper to an exclusive world. That single sound was gasoline on Brittany's fire. Her voice swelled. "We serve a very exclusive clientele here, people with actual money to spend." Diana didn't so much as blink. She simply drifted toward the jewelry display, her jewelry, studying the arrangement, the polish on the glass, the placement of the tags. This was her merchandise, her store, her investment. But to Brittany, it was an opening to press harder. She glided after her, heels clicking like punctuation. "Oh darling, that bracelet costs more than most people's rent for 6 months. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer the costume jewelry section at Target?" The words were dipped in venom and polished with mockery. Not just rudeness, cruelty with precision. And cruelty has a scent. The crowd began to smell it. From corners of the store, heads turned. Conversations faltered. A man in a tailored suit strolled closer, curiosity in his eyes. Two women abandoned the shoe section to watch. What had been a private sting was turning into a public spectacle. Brittany thrived on it. She pivoted toward the onlookers, her smile sharpening. Some people just don't understand their place in the world, do they? The man in the suit actually laughed. She's got a point. Another woman nodded, whispering to her friend as if joining in made them part of some invisible club. Diana stood in their gaze like an oak in the wind. Brittany, sensing the energy swell, raised her voice. "Ma'am, I'm trying to save you the embarrassment of being declined when you can't afford our payment plans." Tyler Brooks, 35, loyal to Brittany for nearly a decade, stationed himself nearby. He didn't speak, but the way he crossed his arms was a silent endorsement. Maria Gonzalez stayed behind the counter, knuckles whitening around the register keys. She knew this was wrong, but rent, groceries, her son's school fees, her silence was survival. Then Diana did something unexpected. She moved toward the VIP dress section, and with quiet grace, selected a $4,000 designer gown. "I'd like to try this one," she said. Brittany's eyes lit with the thrill of fresh prey. She turned to the store with the timing of a stage actress. "Attention, everyone. This lady would like to try on our $4,000 designer dress." The store stilled. Shoppers paused mid-swipe of credit cards. Even Carlos Rivera, the security guard, stopped scanning the entrance. All eyes were on Diana, standing with the gown draped over her arm like it belonged there. Brittany let the silence stretch, building the tension. Then, with a theatrical sigh, she delivered her line, "Should I tell her our fitting room policy requires a credit check first?" Murmurs rippled. Amber Davis, just 24 and hanging on Brittany's every word, giggled. "Miss Anderson is so funny." It was permission enough for Brittany to double down. She raked her gaze over Diana, head to toe, and in a voice meant to carry said, "Honey, that dress costs more than your car is worth, assuming you have a car and didn't take the bus here." The cruelty was not casual. It was crafted, aimed to strip dignity layer by layer. Helen Carter, buoyed by the audience's smirks, added her own blade. "Really, dear, there are plenty of lovely stores more suitable for your budget." Diana's composure was a lesson in itself. She didn't defend her clothes, her car, or her worth. She simply asked, "May I speak to the manager?" Brittany spread her arms, basking in the attention. "Congratulations, you're looking at her. And I'm telling you, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time wearing the wrong clothes." Phones appeared. Screens glowed. This moment was already being digitized, preserved, prepared for the feed. Brittany played to it. "Let me guess," she sneered. "You saw this place on Instagram and thought you'd come pretend to shop? Well, this isn't dress-up time." And somewhere in that growing crowd, someone hit the record button, not knowing they were capturing the beginning of the end. Tyler Brooks finally stepped forward, his voice steady, almost reverent. "Miss Anderson handles these situations perfectly." That was the signal. The others, employees and customers alike, fell into alignment. Even Carlos Rivera, the security guard whose broad frame usually stayed relaxed and unobtrusive, gave a slow, approving nod from his post near the entrance. And then Brittany Anderson delivered the line that would echo in the store's memory long after the cameras stopped recording. She swept her arm in a wide arc as though presenting a masterpiece to a jury. "Look around you, sweetie. Look at our real customers. Notice anything different? They belong here. They can afford to breathe the same air as our merchandise." It wasn't just humiliation anymore, it was erasure. Brittany's voice carved Diana out of the room, stripping her humanity down to nothing. She wasn't merely unworthy to own what the store sold, she was unworthy to exist in the same space as it. And the crowd nodded. They murmured in agreement. A few even clapped. The faces surrounding Diana were no longer curious. They were hostile, unified by a shared belief that she didn't belong. But Brittany wasn't finished. Not yet. She tilted her head with mock sympathy. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to check your purse." The room reacted, a low ripple of gasps and murmurs. "It's store policy," she added, her lips curling into a smirk. "When someone clearly doesn't belong, we check for sticky fingers." She hadn't said the word thief, but the implication was bright and sharp as broken glass. Diana didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She handed over her purse with the same calm grace she'd shown since the first insult. But Brittany, she turned the inspection into theater. "Well, let's see what we have here," she said, fishing through the bag with exaggerated delicacy. "Kiss. Tissues. And what's this?" From the purse, Brittany lifted a wallet, soft leather, fraying at the edges, held together at one corner with a strip of tape. To Diana, It was a token of practicality, a reminder of where she'd come from and why she never forgot. To Brittany it was the perfect prop. She held it high like a piece of damning evidence. "Look at this, everyone." Held together with tape. "This is what shopping above your station looks like." The crowd erupted in laughter. Fingers pointed. Phones angled for a better shot. Helen Carter's voice sliced through the noise. "Poor thing probably saved for months just to window shop." A man nearby joined in. "She probably uses coupons at McDonald's." Diana Williams, billionaire, employer of 50,000 people, self-made from nothing, stood in the middle of her own store while strangers laughed like schoolyard bullies. Brittany, triumphant, delivered what she clearly believed was the coup de grace. "Ma'am, I'm going to do you a favor. There's a nice little discount store down the street where you might actually find something in your price range." Maria Gonzalez leaned toward Amber Davis and whispered, "She's so good at protecting our image." Amber grinned and nodded. Even staff from other departments had wandered in, drawn by the spectacle. They all wore the same expression, the satisfied look of people convinced they were witnessing a masterclass in keeping the wrong type out. What none of them knew, what not a single person suspected, was that Diana had been recording the entire thing. Every insult, every sarcastic "sweetie," every laugh at the jewelry counter, every mock announcement about the $4,000 dress, the wallet shaming, the crowd's jeers. All of it, in crisp, high-definition video with audio so clear you could hear the smirk in Brittany's voice. This wasn't random. Diana had walked into store 47 that morning because she'd received complaints about discrimination and toxic culture. What she found was beyond confirmation. It was a living, breathing case study. And she had just gathered the most damning evidence imaginable. Around her, the cruelty rolled on. "Thrift store on 5th Street's having a sale," someone shouted from the back. "There's a consignment shop that might be more her speed," another added. "What about garage sales? Or the clearance rack at Target?" Each suggestion landed like a slap, and each time the crowd laughed harder, competing for the sharpest insult, the most cutting remark. These weren't teenagers showing off for peers. These were adults, people who hosted charity galas, wore designer watches, and posted about giving back on social media. And yet here they were, pouring their wit into demeaning a stranger for sport. Brittany clapped her hands like a party hostess rallying her guests. "See? Our customers are so helpful. They know quality when they see it, and when they don't." The applause swelled, cruel and gleeful. And in the middle of it, Diana Williams stood silently, her phone still recording. Her quiet patience, not submission, but strategy. Because the crowd thought they'd watched a woman lose her dignity. What they were actually watching was the beginning of their own reckoning. The cruelty had become a competition now, a twisted game to see who could be the sharpest, the most degrading. An elderly man in a tailored navy suit lifted his chin and bellowed, "Maybe the dollar store has something in her budget." He lingered on the word dollar as if it were the name of a sewer plant. A woman in crimson designer heels stepped forward, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I hear the Salvation Army is lovely this time of year." The faux kindness in her tone made the insult sting all the sharper. A younger man in a camel-colored cashmere coat called out, "There's always online shopping. I bet she could find some great deals on discount sites." "Don't forget about outlet malls," came another voice from the back. "They have all the designer labels, even she could afford them." The feeding frenzy was on. They weren't just throwing out suggestions anymore, they were building on them, embellishing them as if crafting a group story at Diana's expense. "The Dollar General has a whole clothing section now," one customer offered with mock enthusiasm. "Very affordable," another chimed in. "And Walmart has everything in one place," added a third, "so convenient for people on a tight budget." Helen Carter, ever the self-appointed guardian of proper clientele, stepped into the circle like an expert witness. "I've heard the Goodwill in this area gets wonderful donations. She might find something almost fashionable." The condescension was suffocating. They weren't speaking to Diana anymore, they were speaking about her as though she were an abstract cautionary tale instead of a living woman standing in their midst. Tyler Brooks, feeding on the mob's energy, joined in. "There's those discount stores where everything's under $20, perfect for someone watching every penny." Maria Gonzalez nodded silently, the fear in her eyes betraying her agreement was only for survival. Amber Davis, meanwhile, looked like a child at a carnival, whisper shouting to other employees about how incredible this whole scene was. Through it all, Diana Williams stood rooted. No tears, no trembling, no sudden reveal. Just a calm so steady it was unnerving, And in her eyes, the flicker of something no one recognized, calculation. She was memorizing. Every smirk, every voice, every single person who had chosen cruelty over decency. This was no longer just Brittany's performance. This was a mob. A store full of people who had traded their humanity for a moment of shared superiority. Suggestions kept coming, each one wrapped in a thin veil of mock helpfulness. What about those warehouse clubs where you buy in bulk? There's a consignment shop with practical clothes. Has anyone mentioned yard sales? Brittany, the conductor of this orchestra, nodded approvingly at every line, layering her own commentary over the insults. Such wonderful suggestions, she cooed. You can see why we serve the best clientele in the city. They understand quality and appropriateness. That last word landed like a blade. In one breath, Brittany reduced Diana's presence to a violation of order, as if her very existence in this store was offensive to decent people. But Brittany wasn't done. She was saving something, the grand finale. You could see it in her eyes. She raised her hand. The crowd hushed instantly. Brittany looked around the room, locking eyes with her loyalists, milking the tension. And then, with the voice of a teacher explaining the obvious to a hopeless pupil, she began. Honey, let me paint you a picture. Let me help you understand where you are, and what you're asking for. She pointed toward the VIP rack. That dress you wanted to try? That's someone's mortgage payment. And not just 1 month, that's several months for some folks' entire house. Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. That handbag you touched, she continued, is a car payment. Not just any car, a luxury car. What successful people spend in a single month. She turned to the display case, where a pair of delicate Italian shoes sat in pristine light. That's a month of groceries for a family of 4. Brittany paused, letting the comparison sink in. The audience was rapt. This store, she concluded, isn't for people who count pennies. It's for people who don't have to count at all. We serve customers who see a $4,000 dress and think, that's cute, not that's impossible. She smiled, slow and sure, certain she had just delivered the killing blow. What she didn't realize was that Diana had recorded every single word. Her words poured like syrup laced with venom. Rebecca Turner, senior sales associate in this gleaming temple of glass and gold, lifted her chin and addressed the onlookers as if from a pulpit. Impulse buyers, she said, who choose handbags to match their moods, people who shop for the thrill, not the need. A murmur rippled through the well-dressed crowd, satisfaction, agreement, superiority blooming in their eyes. They leaned in, nodding along, their faces alight as if she were unveiling eternal truths, not wielding cruel put-downs. Rebecca's voice climbed to a theatrical pitch. Look at our clientele, really look. Her arm swept toward the plate glass window, where a row of silver, black, and pearl-white luxury cars gleamed in the afternoon light, BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas. Vehicles worth more than most folks make in a year, she said, each word polished to a shine. Look at the jewelry our customers wear just to run errands, watches that cost more than a college degree, necklaces that could launch a business. And how do our real customers dress? Not because they must, but because they can. Designer from head to toe, quality as a default setting, not an aspiration. Applause began to gather like an oncoming storm, but Rebecca stilled it with a lifted hand. This is a different world, sweetie. A world where money isn't an obstacle, just a tool. Where the question isn't, can I afford this? It's, do I want this? Heads nodded. Someone whispered, exactly. Another, she's absolutely right. They believed she was voicing some deep truth about their station in life, not just building a wall but raising it higher. Then came the knife's twist. You came in here pretending to be someone you're not. But we see through it. The mended clothes, the taped-up wallet that should have been retired years ago, the way you touch these shelves like you've stumbled into a museum instead of a store. Gasp. Tight smiles. Rebecca's voice sharpened to a cutting edge. You don't belong in this world and everyone here knows it. This isn't cruelty, this is reality. Different people live at different levels, and those levels don't mix. Her gesture took in the store's gilded shelves, the carefully lit displays. This is our space where we savor the fruits of success, surround ourselves with beauty, shop among our peers. And you, her eyes bored into Alicia Brooks, you're not one of us. The cruelty was so complete, so deliberate, it left the air heavy. In front of dozens of witnesses, she'd reduced a human being to an economic category, stripped away dignity like old paint. And then, the unthinkable. The store erupted. Not in protest, but in thunderous applause. Some whistled. Some stood. "Bravo," shouted one man. "Perfectly said," another called. "Finally someone tells it like it is," came a third. Rebecca curtsied as though she just ended a Broadway run. "It's all about maintaining standards," she said, her cheeks flushed with triumph. Helen Carter beamed like she'd witnessed a historic moment. Tyler Brooks clapped hard, convinced this was flawless management. Others joined in, swept up in the intoxicating sense of shared superiority, even those who'd stood on the margins moments before. Alicia opened her mouth to speak. The crack of Rebecca's hand across her cheek split the air like a gunshot. The room froze. Not the quiet of polite ignorance, but the stunned, breathless silence of people watching something they could hardly process. Rebecca stood with her hands still raised, chest heaving, flushed with the thrill of what she thought was righteous discipline. "Now," she said coldly, "security will escort you out so our real customers can shop in peace." Carlos Rivera stepped forward. The crowd parted, eager to witness the final humiliation. Phones raced to capture it. Alicia's walk to the door would be a march through the gauntlet, a path of shame carved in gold and glass. They thought this was victory. They thought they were watching the gold standard for maintaining standards. They would tell this story for years, the afternoon they saw a trespasser put in her place. But they didn't realize the trespasser owned the palace. It was the moment that would have been comical if it weren't so vicious. A billionaire businesswoman about to be escorted out of her own store, by her own security, cheered on by her own customers. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. Inside they chose cruelty over kindness, exclusion over inclusion, mob over conscience. But something was coming. Something no one saw on the horizon. Because Alicia Brooks had been recording. Every smirk. Every insult. Every round of applause. Captured in crystal-clear high-definition video, with audio sharp enough to pick up the rustle of handbags and the hiss of whispered gossip. And now it was time to make a phone call. She didn't storm out. She didn't lower her head. She walked toward the exit with the poise of a woman who had built a $3 billion empire brick by brick. The automatic doors opened to the quiet cool of the parking lot, a sharp relief from the thick, toxic air inside. Through the glass, Alicia could see Rebecca Turner still basking in her moment, spinning her tail like she'd saved the store from an invading army. Alicia pulled her phone from her bag. Her voice was calm, steady, professional, the same voice she'd used in boardrooms when closing international acquisitions. "James, this is Alicia." James Carter, her assistant of 8 years, had handled hostile takeovers, government hearings, and expansion into 5 countries. But he'd never heard her speak quite like this. "I need immediate legal and security at Store 47. This is a code red." Inside, Rebecca caught sight of her through the glass and grinned wider, mistaking composure for retreat. She cupped her hands and shouted, "And don't come back. Tell your friends this isn't the place for people like you." The crowd roared with laughter and approval. It was their final toast to a perceived victory. "James," Alicia continued, "bring the ownership documents for Store 47. Also bring today's security footage, all of it. And bring the legal team. Every single one of them." James asked something on the other end. "No, this isn't about a lawsuit," Alicia replied, her gaze locked on the laughing faces behind the glass. "This is about showing people who we really are." Inside, champagne corks popped. Helen Mitchell clapped as if history were being made. Tyler Harris fetched the good bottles from the back, Dom Perignon for this special occasion. Maria Gonzalez lined up the glasses, her hands moving out of habit, her eyes uneasy. Amber Davis chattered like a radio stuck on praise, telling anyone who would listen. She handled it perfectly, so professional. Rebecca raised her flute. To maintaining excellence. To protecting what makes this place special. Glasses clinked. Foam sparkled. They were drunk on the illusion of moral victory. But outside, Alicia was crafting the real ending. "How long until you arrive?" she asked James. Pause. "Good. And James, make sure the entire board of directors knows what happened here today. This is going to change everything." She ended the call, her eyes still on the celebration through the glass. She memorized every face, each one marked in her mind, those who had chosen to celebrate humiliation over decency. At exactly 3:47 p.m., 3 black SUVs rolled silently into the lot. They were the kind of vehicles that didn't announce themselves with flash but with the quiet authority of serious business. From them stepped the heavyweights of Prestige Collections. Rachel Stone, Director of Human Resources. Michael Torres, Head of Legal. Sarah Chin, Chief Operating Officer. David Kim, Director of Security. And behind them, they did not arrive like shoppers. They came with the quiet precision of people whose footsteps carried authority. A team of lawyers, investigators, and corporate executives, the kind of company you send when something has gone terribly wrong. Inside, heads turned toward the parking lot. At first there was only idle curiosity. Expensive cars and entourages were nothing new here. But as the group drew closer, there was something in their stride, something in the clipped exchange of glances, that made the air feel different. Rebecca Turner spotted them first. Her heart leapt. Surely this was recognition. Word must have spread about how brilliantly she'd protected the store earlier. Perhaps they'd come to thank her, praise her, reward her. When the doors parted, she stepped forward, her brightest, most professional smile in place. "Perfect timing," she said warmly. "I just handled a very difficult situation. You may have seen the woman outside. Completely wrong for our clientele, but I managed it flawlessly with complete professionalism." Rachel Stone, a woman in her 50s with eyes that missed nothing, let her gaze sweep the store. The champagne, the clinking glasses, the smug satisfaction etched into every face. "Miss Turner, I presume?" "Yes," Rebecca said proudly. "Rebecca Turner. Store manager for 12 years. I've built an exceptional team here. We know how to maintain our standards. Today I defended our brand image and our real customers. Everyone here can vouch for my professionalism." Rachel's expression did not change. Behind her, the legal team fanned out, murmuring, taking notes. Helen Mitchell, still drunk on earlier righteousness, stepped forward. "She was magnificent," Helen gushed. "Handled that awful woman perfectly." "Yes," another chimed in. "Rebecca saved us from an uncomfortable situation. That woman had no business here." To them this was a victory lap. They expected plaques and promotions. Rachel Stone's voice stayed level. "Miss Turner, we need to discuss your handling of a customer today." Rebecca's pride swelled. "I followed every protocol. I preserved the shopping experience for our valued customers. It was textbook management." She gestured toward the room. "As you can see, everyone is satisfied. We even opened champagne to celebrate our high standards." Rachel nodded slowly. "And you're confident your handling of this situation reflects the values of Prestige Collections?" "Absolutely. I know exactly what we stand for: excellence, exclusivity, serving customers who appreciate quality. I protected all of that today." One of the attorneys returned to Rachel's side and whispered. Rachel listened, then said, "Miss Turner, I'd like you to meet someone." And from behind the corporate line, Alicia Brooks stepped forward. The store fell silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of stillness that presses on the eardrums. Rebecca blinked. "Yes, this is the woman I was telling you about, the one who clearly didn't belong. I handled her perfectly." Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "Miss Turner, meet Alicia Brooks, founder, CEO, and owner of Prestige Collections. Your boss." The words hit like a depth charge. Confidence drained from faces. Glasses froze midair. Someone's breath caught loud enough to be heard in the stillness. That's impossible," Rebecca stammered. She dresses like." "Like what, Rebecca?" Alicia's voice was soft steel. "Like someone who doesn't deserve basic human respect?" The shift in the room was seismic. The proud faces began to crack, confusion sliding into shame, shame into dread. Helen Mitchell's glow faded, replaced by the pallor of a woman realizing she had cheered her own undoing. Backing away with her hand over her mouth, Maria Gonzalez, the single mother who had just been trying to keep her job, started panicking. "Oh my God, what have we done? Miss Williams, I'm so sorry. I was just following orders, I didn't know. Please, I need this job." Amber Davis, the young cashier who had thought Brittany was so amazing, started crying. "I didn't know. She told us you were, she said you didn't belong. I'm so sorry." Tyler Brooks, who had applauded Brittany's performance, went completely white and started stammering apologies. The customers who had participated in the humiliation suddenly realized they had just publicly mocked and degraded the owner of the store they were standing in. Some started trying to leave quietly, hoping they could escape before anyone noticed their participation. But Diana had been recording everything, and she remembered every face. The champagne glasses suddenly felt very heavy in people's hands. The celebratory atmosphere turned into a nightmare of regret and fear. Brittany was in complete shock. Her entire world had just collapsed in the span of 30 seconds. Everything she had thought she knew, everything she had been confident about, everything she had built her identity around, had just been revealed as a catastrophic mistake. "I didn't know," she whispered. "How was I supposed to know? You dress like, you look like, But Diana didn't let her finish. "I look like someone you decided didn't deserve to be treated like a human being." The corporate team was taking notes on everything, every reaction, every excuse, every attempt to minimize what had happened. Rachel Stone stepped forward. "Miss Anderson, based on what we've witnessed and the reports we've received, your employment with Prestige Collections is terminated immediately." Security officers stepped forward and began removing Brittany's name tag and security badge. She was banned from all Prestige Collections properties, permanently. But Diana wasn't finished. She addressed the entire store. "For 8 hours, you've all participated in systematic humiliation based on nothing but appearance and assumptions. You decided I didn't belong here because of how I looked. You mocked me, degraded me, and celebrated my humiliation." Her voice never rose, but every word hit like a hammer. "You said I don't belong here, Brittany? You're right. I don't belong in a place that treats human beings like this. But this is my store, and I'm going to make sure it reflects my values." The consequences came swift and severe. Maria Gonzalez and Amber Davis, terminated for participating in the discrimination. Tyler Brooks, demoted and required to complete mandatory bias training. Helen Carter, banned from the store permanently. Several customers who had participated, banned from all Prestige Collection stores. Diana announced a complete overhaul of store culture and management, new training programs, new policies, new leadership. But her final message was what really mattered. Dignity isn't earned by your bank account. Respect isn't purchased with designer clothes. And belonging isn't determined by someone else's prejudice. Today, you all learned that the most dangerous assumption you can make is thinking you know someone's worth based on their appearance. The store that had been celebrating exclusion and cruelty just minutes earlier was now facing the consequences of their choices. And Diana Williams, the woman they had tried to humiliate and exclude, was the one who would determine their futures. Sometimes justice didn't come from the courts or the law. Sometimes it came from the simple fact that you never knew who you were talking to. And treating people with dignity wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the smart thing to do. Because you never knew when the person you were looking down on might actually have been looking down on you from a height you couldn't even imagine. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.